Okay, so I've laid out my fabric, and this is the back of the Leschi top, place 1 on the fold. So this is the fold. I've placed the pattern piece down, and I'm just cutting around it right now. I'm going to make this today as if I were new to garment sewing, and I'm not going to use my serger like I normally would. I'm going to do the whole thing on the sewing machine so that everyone feels included and you can see that you can make beautiful garments with just a sewing machine. I highly recommend cutting out. You could rough cut your pattern pieces first, and then if you're using a highly frayed fabric like this, silk can tend to fray easily. Just come along the edges with some pinking shears, and it prevents the fabric from fraying while you're working. And also, when we sew it together, it helps the garment last longer. I'm just going to do this really quick. I love my pinking shears from Havells. They're pink. This is pink. My mat's pink. Okay, so there's the back piece cut on the fold. Now at the top, you want to do your notches. That's really important, along the arm side and up here. So according to your size, you'll cut your little notches here. There's 2. And then come along here and find the size that you cut out and cut that number. So mine is here, it's a 6. I should point out that I cut out a 6 at the top. All of this is a size 6, and then I graded it out ever so gently to a 10 down here. But because this up here is a 6, you want to make sure that you're cutting the same size for the arm sleeve. So this is a 6 as well, okay? All right, I'm gonna pin this together. This is the front, and it's also on the fold. Now up here we've got a cut in here. Okay, and then I'm going to use scissors to notch that over. You're just cutting out a little area here. It creates a beautiful V neckline later on, you'll see. Now make sure to do the notches here. There's one up here, one here, one here on the arm side. Let's check. Nowhere else. Okay. Cut the notches. The back has 2 notches, and that's important to differentiate here. kind of like this. You could just measure this piece too and cut it. And you're cutting 2 pieces, and those will be the little cuffs. Okay, we've got all of our pieces cut. Now I'm using this interfacing because this is what I've got on hand. It is a knit interfacing, but it's just nice and lightweight. I use it for a lot of clothing because it's so flimsy and light. You want a piece of interfacing that is half of the collar. So when I measured this, I saw it was 1.5 inches is half of this. So I'm just going to measure that 1.5 inches and cut it with my ruler, because I don't want to cut my pattern piece. Okay, and that will go there. Now we will stay stitch. Step 1 is stay stitching at 1/4 inch allowance for all the neck and armhole sections. So I'm going to take the back piece. I'm going to stay stitch on both of these sections here. On the front pattern piece, we're going to stay stitch both armholes as well as the neckline, so all through here as well. And then on the back yoke piece, we will stay stitch both armholes and along the neckline as well. Okay, so take the bottom back piece, and between those notches we made in the pattern, let's see if I can, it's not a very big area. From here to here, we're going to sew basted stitches so that we can pull that thread and gather it. So I'm going to do 2 rows of really big stitches, and with this fabric, it might gather itself. We'll see. I'm turning my tension all the way up, and then my stitch is on the biggest length, longest length. would gather itself. I'm just going to do that one row because that really gathered well. Now take the back yoke piece, mark your right sides. This fabric is really difficult to tell which is the right side. I think this is it. And then what you want to do is gather these threads a bit so that this edge matches the width of this edge. Make sure your gathers look nice and they're even. Oh, see, you always want to check that. Look at that, I pinned that completely wrong there. It fell down a bit. A trick with gathers is you want to sew while you're looking at your gathers, because they can tend to do pleats and puckers, and that ain't cute. Okay, we're going to sew all the way across here. Now here it can be helpful to use a stiletto or little pliers. There. Okay, now we want to finish that edge, so I'm going to pink it. Some of you might have a serger and want to serge this edge. Yay! Now press the seam allowance towards the yoke and we'll top stitch that down. Pressing is up. I just kind of do it with my fingers first. Okay, looks good. It's already starting to look like a shirt and we're, 2 steps in. It's cool. Okay, now we're just going to top stitch right along there to hold that seam allowance in place. Remember when you sew not to pull or tug on your material. Just let the feed dogs do the work. Look, it's already looking cute, right? Okay, next step. If you're following along in the pattern, we're on step 5 now. So you're going to take the front, and we made those notches. You can barely see them there, but they're there. And we're going to gather between the notches just like we did on the back. So now you're just going to gather those a bit. It's not very much, it's just a touch. It's just a nice delicate detail. And now we're going to sew that to the back. Right sides together. I think this is the right side. Oh goodness me, I should have marked it. Maybe that's the right side. Who knows? Who cares? All right. So gather that enough so that they match. You turned your stitches back to normal now, right? No more gathering. I'm going to go along there again. The shoulders have the most stress, so you want to really make this a strong seam. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I'm going to sew that one again too. Okay, make sure you're happy with how it looks, which I am. That's going to be really pretty. And then press your seam allowance to the back. I'm going to finger press that first. And now we will top stitch along the seam allowance on each side. You're going to want to come back in here and treat the seam allowance. So either trim it down with your pinking shears or whatever method you want to do. Serging is great too. There. Pinking shears work. Okay, so our top is looking good. We're going to set it aside for the moment. Take your collar and your interfacing. Fold your collar in half, wrong sides together, and give it a press. Now I do that so I can better visualize where I'm placing that interfacing. So now I come in and lay the sort of bumpy side of the interfacing down onto the fabric. Remember, we're on the wrong side of the fabric. Bring this back over and press again to fuse it. Okay, now I do this step first. I come in here and I trim that raw edge of the collar all the way down. Okay. Now fold in half, short ends like this, and mark the center. You can use a pin or an erasable pen. There's the center. Take your top. We're now on step 10, by the way, in the pattern. Find the center of the back. And you're going to match those together. I can see the center crease from where I cut that garment, this on the fold. So just make sure that you're aligning them as best you can for the center. And now you're going to work your way around. Raw edges are aligned. And bring it all the way down. Previously, when we stay stitched the neckline, I have a very faint stitch line under here, and that's about where these cross over as well. So that's a good indication that all this is fitting nicely. I'm just going to pin this together like this. We're going to sew the collar on. We're going to stop at the stay stitching, which is right about there. We're going to sew all the way around the collar, all the way down, and stopping again at that stay stitching indicator. This is step 10 still, or step 11. So if you want to read that quickly before you sew, it's a good idea. I'm starting at my stay stitching mark. Don't sew over your pins. I know you don't want to be told what to do, but I'm a nurse and I've seen too many pins and eyes. It's not worth it. Okay, we're down, stopping because there's my stay stitching line right there, so we want to stop. Okay, this is probably the trickiest part, and if you need more visualization, Kimberly talks about this on her blog as well. I like to face it like this. It's easier for me to clip in here. My stay stitching seam is here, so we are going to make little notches up to that stay stitching line. Okay, this is step 12 in the pattern. Then we press the collar seam allowance toward the shirt front. Which sounds complicated, but really you're just making the collar so that it looks pretty, and I just use my finger and I go all the way around. And the seam allowance is going towards the shirt, not towards the collar. And that forces those tails, when we get down here, to tuck in. Now sometimes I don't clip quite enough, and that's okay, just come in. Sometimes it just takes one little thread. Okay, so it does take some time to get that collar sitting right. Just be patient. As you can see here, I still have a little stitch showing there, so I'm just going to carefully clip it. There. Press it out. Now the shirt is not sewn together yet on the sides, so you can flip it up. You can see how my tails and that stay stitching flap there are sitting underneath. Now we'll trim that later, but let's get this sewn down first. Nice and neat. It can help to have a ham, if you've got one, to place it in between the layers. Okay, I'm going to go inside. I don't want them to bubble or anything while I pin this in place. I'm going to get both of those tails together now, okay? So now I can separate it. And you can see how easily that it's like a magic trick. It just sits nicely and the collar looks great. First time I did that, I thought, oh, that's genius. It's a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, beautiful. Now I trim these away with my pinking shears. Okay, the hardest part is done. Rejoice. All right, fold your shirt right sides together. Pin the sides together, matching the arm side and all the way down to the edge. And we're just going to sew on both sides all the way down. Okay, the sides are sewn together. Check, make sure they're good to go on both sides and that nothing got wrinkled or puckered. And then come in if you need to, if you didn't already cut it out with pinking shears, and pink these edges. Set that aside. And now we will do the arms.